Side routes are a relative rarity in visual novels, usually only done by a handful of developers, and typically to throw in one more quick, shorter route that doesn't necessarily follow the main theme of the other routes. Among these side routes, though, one that easily stood out to me is from Yuzusoft's Sanoba Witch or Sabbat of the Witches, Wakana Kariya. While I think other side routes from Yuzusoft are perfectly fine, like Roka and Koharu from Senran Banka, and apparently Orie from Angelic Chaos Reboot, which is supposedly a particularly good one, though I haven't gotten to that visual novel yet, I have a particular bias towards Wakana's route. I've always had a bias towards tomboyish characters, and while I'm generally not into overly short, petite girls, I like Wakana's relatively strong personality, which makes her stand out. She is one of the few heroines I can think of in visual novels who works great both as a side character, female BFF, and a surprisingly legitimate love interest. Sure, she may not have direct magical powers like Nene or Tsumugi, nor does she have secret ties to said magic like Meguro or Toko, but I think Wakana just had that personal bias edge over the other main heroines for me. She can be overly blunt and maybe mildly tsundere at times, but for the most part, she's actually one of the more openly caring heroines of this archetype, which adds a really nice flavor to her. It makes her feel like a legitimate, real friend while still prioritizing being herself and being real with everyone she speaks to. I'm guessing that's why she has a lot of friends outside of just Shuji and Kaido. But anyway, I ranted enough about why I like her as a heroine and her introduction, so what makes me like her actual route as a side route so much? In other side routes in visual novels, even in other Yuzusoft titles, it's pretty clear many just feel thrown in and have zero connection to the main setting and plot. While Wakana's technically also follows this, they make up for it by giving her a surprising amount of screen time. More specifically, I like that her route ties us into what's basically the final event of the common route in the game. In every other main heroine route, Wakana gets sick, so she's unable to perform at a Halloween concert, and Nene has to take her place. But in Wakana's side route, they go all in on hyping up her performance, which I thought was a really cool detail. The fact that this branch rides on the main character, Shuji, actually looking out for Wakana by telling her to properly address her potential sickness so she can be well for the concert was a pretty nice, wholesome detail. Now, admittedly, the way the two characters get together romantically isn't anything special on paper. It involves the two going to a music studio to practice their guitars. A lot of the fun back and forth banter they have as friends continues here, and ultimately, this leads to a, at least to me, surprisingly natural friends to lovers relationship. Sure, there are a few silly accidental pervert scenes that are important for the sexual tension to start, and the fact that all the private practice leads to some private kissing in the music room is a little silly, but I'm not gonna lie, I still thought it was kind of cute. After all that practice is done, Wakana is now fully rested, so she doesn't get sick and gets one of the best treatments I've seen for a side heroine in visual novels. She actually gets an insert song complete with video that's basically a vocal version of one of the slice of life BGM themes when you hang out with her and Kaido throughout the game. The fact that she gets an insert song while the other main heroines do not showed that the writers really wanted to put more effort into showing Wakana's importance despite not having any direct relation to the magical girl stuff. The end of this concert leads to one of my favorite, funniest parts of the whole visual novel. Right after Shuji attempts to confess to Wakana on stage after the performance, she runs away. The audience empathizing with him and even resorting to English, calling him was both surprisingly hilarious and wholesome in a way, despite him being rejected at the time. Of course, we find out immediately after that Wakana was just being tsundere and didn't want to immediately reply to an unexpected confession in public. In private, she's more than willing to accept the feelings that have been growing between them. After this moment, it's mostly just a bunch of typical moe romance, but thankfully, unlike a few of the other main heroine routes in Sanoba that, in my opinion, just made the slice of life heavy parts go on a bit too long, Wakana's ended up being just the right length. However, in between this moe stuff and of course the H scenes, there are actually a few things that helped me like her even more. There was a part where Wakana more or less showed why she was interested in Shuji romantically, where apparently they knew each other when they were younger. I guess we can call them forgotten childhood friends or probably acquaintances in this case. But she noticed how Shuji was incredibly quiet because, at the time, his powers made it hard to speak to people since he could read their moods. The fact that she got interested in a quiet, standoffish guy like this mirrored a situation I personally had when I was in elementary school, when a similarly outgoing tomboyish girl reached out to me, and she eventually became my closest female friend all the way up until we went to different high schools. So naturally, I had a little bit of bias towards this sort of forgotten childhood friend tomboy thing, which made me remember my childhood in a fond way, since she was my first crush and the closest thing I had to an IRL girlfriend with how we interacted. And speaking of Shuji's powers, even though there's literally no magic plot stuff in Wakana's route, the fact that Shuji does end up coming out to Wakana about his powers, and she's more than willing to accept and help him through it, even though she's literally incapable of directly removing his powers entirely since she has no ties to it. I think in a way this is better than the resolution, say, Meguru's route, which somehow gets rid of Shuji's powers to read people's feelings. But that's basically it for this video. All things considered, compared to a full-length main heroine route, Wakana's route isn't anything special. I can't blame people for forgetting it since many side routes in visual novels tend to be just as forgettable because of how much they feel clearly thrown in at the last minute. However, I thought Wakana's side route was not only a relationship that I found relatable in terms of appealing to my personal biases and nostalgia, but also, I think in a way, she's actually one of the better fits for Shuji as he's a very passive guy due to having to try hard to appeal to everyone, while Wakana is very blunt and real with everyone she talks to. It helps that they're already friends when the story starts, and I think her route was a surprisingly effective friends to lovers route, especially for a side one where I find it's really hard to find good friends to lovers routes in general in visual novels. Getting a special concert event and insert songs was just a really nice icing on the cake. Anyway, that's my mini rant over on why I think Wakana Kariya from Sanoba Witch has my favorite side route in visual novels. What is your opinion on Wakana's route in Sabbat of the Witch, and what are some of your opinions on other side routes in visual novels? Feel free to leave a comment below.